left and right, or the port and starboard sides of the side scan sonar that you see in yellow and blue, those are actually two different frequencies. That one shows a larger area in less definition, and another one shows a shorter area in a higher definition.
We can mark that Argus has started the line.
Roger. Start of line.
Thank you.
Rennie, we have a question about your thoughts on LiDAR scanning.
Hi, Miles.
Who's writing it?
No name attached to this one.
Yeah, I worked with I worked with LiDAR systems for my master's degree. What thoughts would you like to know?
Would using a LiDAR be realistic / possible for more detailed scanning than what we are currently receiving?
Well, LiDAR, you can operate with lasers close to the surface. The problem with it is the way that light is not the best source, the best method to use in water. So you can either, you can operate with lasers close to the surface, or you can operate with lasers in shallow water. Say if you're flying a plane over a coastal area, it can penetrate a bit depending on the wavelength of the laser. It can penetrate to some shallow waters, but you could not operate LiDAR in the way that we're currently operating. We would not be able to see as far as we can. Sonar is the better method in water, using acoustic pulses.
Thanks.
If we were in air and we were searching for something on the ground, say if we were a plane and we're looking for a building in a forest or something like that, we would be using LiDAR.
Thanks for all these great questions coming in. And thanks everyone for their great explanations.
There is some tech coming though, using radio, laser, and sound underwater, putting all three in for short distances, in-field stuff.
Yeah, we can. I mean, the Chris Roman lab uses the laser system, but that's super close to the and super high res. But through full ocean depths or anything like that, you can't. Light just does not work that way.
The reason why we're scanning the area that we are has a lot to do with the historical records that Lonnie was able to dig up through her work in the archives. That there was an eyewitness account and about where the wreckage generally was, as well as a coordinate from a search plane that was sent out afterwards. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lonnie.
You're doing a good job.
All right. And that's why we're looking in this area. However, we have just started this 20th line. We have the 21st, if you see in channel 3 right above us, that we'll be doing next. And after that, we've actually made the decision to expand the search area a bit. So we'll continue to keep doing this for a good chunk of more time before we potentially start investigating some of the dive targets that have been previously recorded. A question did come in about discovering an archaeological wreck. Is there some type of tradition of celebration when you've located or found something? Do you pop a champagne bottle?
I wish.
Or
that would be nice to carry champagne on
That would seems like to me like it would be a bit cocky.
trips and things. No, we haven't ever done it. There's more often than not, it's just a lot of hooting and hollering. jumping up and down, celebration.
Bit of rave music.
If you're in the kitchen, I think. Yeah, so when we find the plane, then we'll see.
All right.
But you can all celebrate out there.
Yeah. You can let us know how excited you are, because we will be going nuts. We have about an hour and 20 minutes or so left on this watch, so please continue sending in those questions. We enjoy talking with you all. And I know some of you have said that it's pretty late where you're at, and you need to step away or go to sleep or go to work. Totally fine, we understand. Just we encourage you to follow us on social media at EV Nautilus. We send out regular dive updates, so when we pull up Argus or get ready to attach Hercules, or if we find something, we will be sure to be sending out some social media posts. So
Heck, you'll probably hear us.
Yes.
If we find something.
That faint, exuberant sound you hear in the distance is us.
Bouncing off the ionosphere.
You know, I'd really like to hear from New Zealand, because when this route ended, it meant a lot to New Zealand. They were very excited that they could actually get a letter through to London via America in 10 days with this route, and it was surveyed in 37, and in March 37, and then the last flight was January 38, and the route wasn't reestablished until 1940. So I'd like to hear from some Kiwis what music and this flight meant to them.
Well, I will let you know as soon as I hear from them.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we've still got a good stream of questions coming in. I'm gonna quick kind of go through some of those answers. The orange squiggly line that you are seeing is the path that Argus is taking, and obviously Argus has not jumped all over the map like you see on that map. That's just some of the interference. You'll notice that as we get closer to our turns, it gets kind of, some of those outliers jump out there in terms of location, and that's just as we continue to use our thrusters.
We're also at 3,400 meters depth.
Oh, 3,400, wow.
So, well, yeah, close enough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a bit of,
Yeah, that's much deeper.
yeah. Won't go why it's jumping around a bit.
And the telltale signs, quote unquote, that we might be looking for is some irregular shapes when it comes to comparative to nature. So rocks, for example, do not typically have perfect geometric shapes. So we're looking for things at right angles, for example, or more traditional rectangles. We're very interested in potentially finding the wings, because the eyewitness account said that the wings had stayed together and floated on the water before sinking. So something that might have that kind of rectangular shape, as well as something that might be pretty bright on the side scan sonar, because the side scan sonar is measuring the reflectivity of the surface it's bouncing off and the time it takes for it to come back. So something that's made out of metal such as that would have a pretty high return. But go ahead and keep those questions coming. We appreciate your company. The only thing better than being able to explore the world's ocean is being able to share it with the world while we do it. Our video engineer agrees.
Yep, completely.
Science 2 has a question for Science 1 back here. the metal surfaces of the plane were coated with, were cadmium plated to prevent corrosion. Is that still?
Only the steel surfaces.
The steel surfaces, right. Is that still being done?
Yeah, you know, actually, as far as I know, it is. And then also, actually, aluminum surface are definitely still being anodized.
What's going on up front?
Playful exuberance.
So Lonnie, have you heard of Music Point Radio Group? A music memorial radio station?
Yes, I have. Are they tuning in?
No, but one of our, or they might be, but one of our listeners or viewers actually sent them a email to let them know about our search in case they were unaware.
Oh, that's excellent.
Thank you so much for sharing that with them.
I think they were aware. I think I saw something that they posted about it, but we haven't heard from them, so thanks to our viewer for doing that.
So we have a what if question from a young viewer about if we used, we'll call it an absurd amount of mirrors, would we be able to bounce light from the surface all the way down to the ocean floor? I think the answer to that is no.
Yeah, I can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Peyton.
And that relates to the physics of how water interacts with light. So I think we explained this last watch, but the reason why the ocean is blue and why blue light travels so far in water is because it gets scattered. That's why large water bodies typically look blue, while other wavelengths of light are absorbed. So red and orange get absorbed very quickly relative to blue. But at some point, that light is eventually going to get absorbed all the way. And so even if we were to reflect light, it's still going to get absorbed by water because it still has to travel the same distance to get all the way down to the bottom. This is also really interesting because it creates different zones in the ocean. Like right near the surface, there's an abundance of light and a lot of organisms and plankton are able to grow. While as you get deeper, there's less and less light and the organisms have to adapt to that as well.
Great explanation.
I'm sorry, I brought it back to biology.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. We have a question coming in about our ROVs, and I don't think I see it on our information about the amount of power that is required to power these vehicles.
1,000 amps.
1,000 amps. For both Hercules and Argus a piece, or?
No, for Herc and Argus, it's about 100 amp service. You could run it off your panel at your house or your garage.
Nice.
Or if you're a slight geek, you can tell you we're drawing about 2 amps at 3,000 volts.
We have an inquiry about how ROVs work with our water sediment density ratios.
Take it away, Rennie.
What's the what?
How does your ROV work with water sediment/sediment density ratios?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
We
Try to avoid the sediment.
I think it's is this a pressure question? Like the density, the pressures? Maybe that's what they're asking.
well, we have to put more lead on if we're in seawater versus freshwater.
And everything on the vehicle is compensated if it's not in a titanium housing to deal with all the pressure that we're under, because 3,000 meters is a long way down. So titanium is a very strong metal, and there's specific houses made out of it to house electronics and like the cameras. And then if things aren't in that type of container, then it's oil compensated. So we have a positive pressure, so that if we get any kind of small puncture or leak in it, we can tell the pressure's going down and we can recover. And everything obviously compresses and expands and as we descend and ascend, so that's also the need for the oil compensation.
Thanks for those answers.
And very, very dense, heavy foam
Yes.
is on top.
Isn't it filled with glass beads?
Syntactic foam?
Microspheres.
Microspheres?
Yeah, little tiny bubbles, little tiny glass bubbles mixed with epoxy.
It's expensive too.
I do remember that.
You don't want to breathe it.
Good tip.
So the ROVs are controlled by our pilots. They don't have a type of video game controller. I guess you could kind of consider one of them that way, but there's a nice
The
little
joy box.
Yeah,
It's like a joystick on a box.
Our 4K camera is controlled with an Xbox
We
controller.
lost interest in the
nice.
Yeah.
controller. We
I
needed
don't
some
even know where it
room
is
here.
now. It's up here somewhere. Somewhere.
The ROV is controlled, and most of the other stuff in here, with a joystick. Traditional ones are controlled with the same one that you find in a modern airplane. So
Yeah.
it has a lot of buttons and switches on it, but the primary thing is the X, Y, and Z axis. And also rotate, so you rotate the joystick for heading. So basically the same joystick you'll find on a video game for a flight simulator.
I have a question about the oil you mentioned before. Does it have any insulative properties in terms of keeping it electronics from getting too hot or too cold?
Yeah, that's part of it, and also it can contract and expand, and we have like reservoirs that'll like made out of rubber that can contract and expand, and also it's really cold down under, so that keeps equipment at a happy place temperature wise, because yes, stuff does get hot when you're operating the thrusters and the HPU to operate all the other hydraulics on the vehicle. Not this vehicle, again, Hercules. That is a benefit about going down to these depths. It's very cold.
There's two primary oils used in the ROV. One is hydraulic oil, and one is basically food-grade mineral oil. The hydraulic oil is used in the hydraulic pump to run the thrusters and the manipulator, and the other wiggly bits on the ROV. And the mineral oil is used to compensate static J-boxes, such as a wiring J-box, and areas that we can put oil in, so it doesn't have to be a 1 atmosphere pressure housing. It can just be basically it can be a tin can. As long as it has some positive pressure on it, it won't get collapsed. So typical example on the vehicles, both Argus and Herc, is there's lots of what we call oily cables. They're a urethane cable, basically a garden hose with wires running through them. And those are hooked to a reservoir with a spring and a bladder, and the bladder is exposed to seawater, and the spring is pushing on the bladder, creating a positive pressure, and that changes as we come up and down through the water column with the seawater pressure. So we're looking at a gauge right now, for example, that says 3.5 psi, but there's actually the ambient pressure, which is probably around 5,000 psi, plus that 3.5 psi. So all we need is that positive 3.5 psi. That keeps the oil in and the seawater out.
Also, the enemy of the system on the bottom at these depths too is air. So when we have to do stuff to the vehicle and add oil and add equipment and drain J boxes and hydraulic comps and everything, we have to do a venting process, because obviously air will contract and expand, and it can rupture things in the system if it gets too big.
Yeah, if there's too much air as we dive, the air will compress rapidly compared to the oil, and the compensator won't be able to react fast enough, and we'll take on seawater, which are not really friendly to high voltage and hydraulics.
Yeah, there's some challenges submerging an electric mechanical object in salt water repeatedly, but there's a process for everything. And we have the whole vehicle covered in zincs, anodes.
You can make your own hydraulic system with a syringe and some tubing.
Yeah.
Like some pretty cool robotic arms with the
Yeah.
Those are fun to
syringe,
do.
tubing, some water, and
Our
clever cutting cardboard popsicle sticks.
Our May ROV team made like silicone grippers. So like they were pneumatic. So you would fill it or increase the pressure of the air, and it would cause these chambers to swell, and the entire thing would sort of curl over to pick up objects.
That's cool.
Yeah.
They're probably using stuff like that in, or weren't they experimenting with stuff like that in space to explore
Probably.
different planets and like, yeah, or maybe that was a different.
I think we got the original designs and then modified them from like a Stanford paper.
Are those the sticky fingers you're talking about?
I don't know the exact name. I can look that up really quick.
No, I know what you're talking about.
But they're like, you put them in opposing directions. They're like ice cube trays, like a single ice cube tray that then curls over.
Soft grippers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brendan Phillips is developing those as well.
Yeah, those were, they were using those last year on Sebastian to pick up coral, if I'm thinking about the same thing. There were like 3 intermeshing silicone fingers
so,
that
yes.
bent around.
Hydraulic actuator.
Yeah.
So there's one actuator for all of it, or 3?
I think it's one.
One would just like,
And
they would
so-
all do it at the same time.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Like a chicken foot.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So a question about the black part in the waterfall view of our side scan sonars, and that is the nadir. That's the area directly beneath Argus that is not being scanned because side scan sonar scans the sides. And the great part about that is if you're wondering, say, hey, you know, you might be missing something really important right there. If you look in channel 2, you can see directly below Argus using its HD camera. So we've got you covered either way.
Two pilots and a navigator riveted to the blue screen all times.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So why is it called a nadir? Where'd that come from?
Ralph?
I don't actually. It's NADIR. I'm not really sure
Like,
actually
it's
where
probably a
the
dude's
term
name.
comes from.
Maybe?
But it's directly below. We use the term for multi-beam as well. Just
NIDR.
NADIR.
NAIDR.
NADIR.
No area.
I bet you it's it's probably a guy's name that helped develop side
Oh,
scan.
interesting.
Look it up. Are we looking it up?
No, I think it's an
The-
acronym.
On it.
I looked it up.
Nope, you beat me to it. Go for
Ha ha ha.
It's probably not specific to this.
Yeah, it refers to any direction pointing directly below a particular location, and
Yeah.
the route is Arabic.
Wrong.
So much for
Meaning
Latin.
counterpart.
Yeah, it's.
Say that again,
Zero.
Payne? It's the sorry, I didn't hear-
direction pointing directly below a particular location.
a person's location?
A particular
Any
A
location.
particular
location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, couldn't hear you.
And the Arabic root means counterpart.
Yeah, opposite to the zenith.
Named after a guy named Nader.
That was Ralph.
Why are you so convinced it's a guy?
I don't know, it just sounded right. Like, hello, I'm Stephen Nader.
How about Ralph? Ralph Nader.
Yeah.
Ralph Nader, 1974 Pinot.
Niskins are named after a human.
Sally Niskin.
Yeah, last name Niskin. We
And originally,
use that ever since.
Fridtjof Nansen. That's the original type, right?
Of a
Because there's there's Nansen bottles and Niskin bottles, and I always forget what the difference between the two are.
The name.
That's true.
I've never heard of the
Cheated.
first one you said.
I've heard of
Yeah.
the Nanskin bottle. Is it bigger or
Niskin.
something?
The Niskin bottle is an improvement on the Nansen bottle, patented by
Oh.
Shale Niskin in
Yeah.
March 1966.
That's why you don't hear about the first one.
66.
Obsolete.
Because the original Nansen was sealed on one end, which can cause some problems with like
Air.
water not being passed
Yeah, you're
through
not
it.
getting flow.
Yeah, and then the Nixon bottle improved on that by having both ends open and then capping both.
Yeah.
You gotta hand it to Niskin, one of the only people in history to sell more than 8 of one thing in the science
Yeah.
Yeah.
industry, the science field.
So Lonnie, we have another country to that list. Argentina.
We should start guessing. I don't think so.
Nah, I don't think so either.
I don't
No.
think so.
If she hasn't been to
I don't think she's
Brazil,
been to
That was
South
it.
I
America.
That's what
haven't
was
been to
going on.
Brazil and not Venezuela
Any
and
part of
not
South America?
Argentina.
Oh.
Yes, Peru.
Some-
they're
Peru,
crying for you.
Peru.
Ah,
I've hiked and camped on the Incan Trail.
nice.
You're dropping the ball, Lonnie.
Ah,
You're gonna have
I
to hit up
know.
South America and
I do.
Australia, New Zealand,
I absolutely do.
and China.
I know.
I thought for sure you'd been to China.
The thing is, whenever I mentioned travel, my husband said, well, we've been to most of those places. And I said, yeah, but we were working. We didn't have a
Right.
chance to do anything for fun. Let's go back. And he said, no, I've had it.
Well, we're helping you build a
So
list.
anybody who wants to travel, let me know.
Let us know too, especially if you're paying for it.
Yeah.
I enjoy being in new places and I tolerate travel, so.
An end to a mean. So thanks for joining us as we continue to map this area. We had a question come in. Dr. Megan, you might be able to answer about that expanded search area, about why it was expanded in that direction.
So from what the information that we have, the currents that were taking oil spills and artifacts and debris to the northeast and east. That tells us that we probably want to search in the south and southwest parts. So instead, I mean, we had our search box around the original location, but for our expansion, we want to go more to the south and west areas.
That request has come in multiple times.
What is it?
It's for Rennie to decide. So a question about that side scan sonar and why it appears to be wavy, and that's just some of the interference that comes with the heave of the ship.
And the speed mismatch from the ping rate.
Yes. Rennie, do you have any tales by any chance to regale us
Well, it
with?
sounds like you want to hear the legend of Bobby Argus.
Yes, the legend of Bobby Argus.
Yeah, a few years ago. Well, you're about to find out. A few years ago, we had a different winch system at the time, and one of the cameras was it wasn't as high resolution as camera 12 here. It was a bit lower res. And if you look at camera 5,
well, they can't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, so we have some cameras that are on the vehicles, and we have cameras that are on the ship looking at gauges. And I was, I would say I was new, but I was embarrassingly like a couple years into it. And I just thought that one of the it wasn't my job. It was one of, it wasn't something that I needed to know about.
And you really can't tell those cameras apart. Hold on, I can.
Right. Yeah. So we got this multi-view with a bunch of cameras.
So we've got one camera that looks like that, and then where's util?
Where are you putting that up?
There. I'm just showing on my monitor.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I could stream it, but it's
it's
not that good.
Yeah. Anyway, we have some cameras on gauges on the vehicles and on the ship, and I thought that one of the panels, like if you're looking at camera 12, it's very obvious it's on the ship, but it was not obvious at the time that it was on the ship. So I was just presumed that it was probably set up right next to the other camera. I just thought it was one of the cameras that was on the vehicles. And then I was looking at it one day, and I see a shadow, thinking there's like a little animal or something that's floating around in there, and then I see a hand. And I just kind of jumped and was like, who's down there? Argus.
It's Bobby Argus.
It's Bobby, and so then Gabby and I created Bobby Argus. Oh, that's Bobby Argus.
That's who's down there.
So then there was this whole thing that the winch was actually located on
Sorry,
Argus.
you're not on SPL.
So the bitter end of the winch is on the ship, and then we lower the entire winch to the seafloor with an operator. So
That's a reason to recover right there.
I was like,
we've got to save him.
how did Mark get down on Argus?
I totally get how that could happen, because you're looking at the thing for months and months and months, and nobody's ever there.
Right.
Because that was
that was
in the main hold.
There was no cameras except for right up close to the gauges, so you just saw this metal and gauges. I'm like, well, that's on Argus.
Yeah, it looked like it was a.
So now we have a photo. Now we have videos of all of the winch hold being streamed up here. So anyone who's down there, I'm like, okay, they're actually located on Argus.
There's Bobby.
There, yeah.
I'd be lying if I didn't say that question came in several watches.
Yeah, well, I think what happened was
I was being conservative.
2 of the people on a couple cruises ago who were familiar with the legend of Bobby Argus were retelling it, and now we've got a small fan base of people who want to hear about Bobby.
Is it like the legend of Bagger Vance?
I think it was an honest mistake.
I think we've lost our Argus pilot.
Yeah.
Bobby Argus.
I don't think I've ever seen Simmer laugh like that.
I totally can. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I was showing her some video files the other day, and I heard lots of that laughter. But
The
it's a
gauges
totally
look the
human
same,
thing.
okay? Like, look at them. They're
Yeah,
just
they
gauges
do,
on a
right.
piece of metal. It was a low-res camera.
It was very
You-
low res.
you could
It was-
just-
and not only was it,
Like, what is that?
not only was it low res, it was low light.
Well, I was looking at it with the thought that it was like some creature, like a squid was up in it. So I'm like craning in and like squinting, and then it's a human hand. It's like, oh.
Was everyone staring at you while you did that?
I don't know that they picked up on. I figured it out pretty quick that it was not on the vehicle, but I thought it'd be funny to kind of. Oh, so that camera is no longer. That camera is not on Argus.
Well, several people have said that is hands down the best Nautilus story they've heard yet now.
Oh,
Wow. Well, they haven't. If that's their, they haven't heard many. Then if that's
They've only been listening to SPL.
I can join the Bobby Argus fan club.
Yeah.
Oh, you should get t-shirts.
Yeah, you should.
get
Stickers.
I'd buy one.
Stickers.
And then so yeah, Bobby
Just like a
Argus
big hand, like.
had a specific accent. Gabby and I went down the rabbit hole of who
What
this
Bobby
person
sounded
was.
like.
Yeah.
Rennie, I'm
Give
sorry,
a
this might
background,
go on
family.
in my comics.
No.
Oh, yes.
You have the right to veto it now, but
That was a quality
So now,
story.
yeah. So now the real estate on Argus has expanded, and now it's got people walk around in there checking
Yeah.
the winch. That's all happening down there.
little
Like,
gnomes.
yeah. Thought about how inefficient that operation would be if the
I still have
the
that
end of
audio
the winch
clip
was
of you
tied to
too,
the
Rennie.
ship. What's that?
Do you have the clip from
No,
when he
not
first
that.
saw?
No, not that. This is not a shareable.
Oh.
Okay.
I know what clip he has.
So it sounds like the front is conspiring. So let's talk a little more about what we're doing right now. So for those of you who just joined in, and for those of you who have been watching for a while, we're currently searching for the Simone Clipper, a Sikorsky S-42B. It crashed in January of 1938. About 81 years ago, and we're currently looking for its final resting place. There were 7 crew members on board, including Edwin Musick, a renowned aviator at the time. We're currently doing a side scan sonar of the bottom using Argus, which is normally a tow sled. It's one of our ROVs that takes the heave and motion of the ship for our normal ROV Hercules. Right now we're just towing Argus behind the vessel to look at any interesting topography, anything that could be the wreck using the side scan sonar. And in view number 1 on the satellite feed, that's what you're going to be seeing as those 2 sort of orange-yellow waterfalls.
Great job, Peyton.
Thank you.
Peyton,
That
you
was a
nailed
good
it.
job. Yeah, it was
That
very
was.
good. You have a future in the front row here.
That's right.
Hey, to our teacher in Argentina, wondering if they can ask us questions in a bit when you're with your students. Absolutely. When you get to them and we're still diving, please continue to send in those questions. And in fact,
Yeah, sure.
I encourage you to
Set up an
email.
interaction.
Yeah, go ahead and email education at oet.org to learn how you can interact with us even more. We'd love to be able to talk to your students and answer all their questions they might have.
Yeah. I would do that one. It'd help with that interaction. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
I haven't done one yet this leg.
Oh, there's plenty coming. I think we have Lonnie. You're on one tomorrow?
Stacked at the end of the school year.
Yeah.
So I'm on one right after this watch.
Great.
Tomorrow morning, 4 o'clock.
Oh, very exciting.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm going to sneak out of here.
Yeah.
About 10 minutes early.
You know it's going to happen.
Know what?
It's going to be like, wait, is that a wheel? Oh, Lonnie, time you got to go.
Oh my gosh. Oh no.
I think they could survive without you for that. But that's tomorrow. That's long after we found it for Mike for his birthday.
Yeah, we found it for Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a lot of pilots out there, and for those of you who are pilots, and for those of you who are nervous passengers, I found a description from a pilot who flew into the Pongo Pongo Harbor with Edwin Music.
Oh. Ooh.
He said, as we know, it's a boot-shaped harbor walled in by hills 1,500 feet high. It's like landing into a well. You scrape over the hills from the west, cut the motors, and dive for the water. Airspeed needle shoots upward. Just over the surface, you flatten out of the dive. It seemed hours before the ship lost flying speed. The first officer was pale.
Wow.
So they probably
So they totally cut the motors once they made it
Cut
up.
Yeah.
the motors,
full flaps at that point, probably.
probably. And then just dive for the water. Come over
I
that
wonder if they
hill.
have speed brakes.
I don't know if I'd
Probably
want
not.
to be on with them when they did that. Might be a bit too much for me.
There's a term that, I don't know if civilian pilots use it, but military helicopter pilots do. They're flying a profile called nap of the Earth. So they're at a relatively fixed altitude,
Mm-hmm.
which is usually measured in tens of feet, sometimes hundreds.
Yeah.
And they follow the contours of the terrain.
Mm-hmm.
Up and
So
down.
they're never, up and down, bang, and the pilots, the military pilots, will call that yanking and banking.
Hmm.
Because they're going up and down,
Yeah.
and then banking the aircraft around to make corners and canyons and stuff. And so it's a enthralling mode of flight.
A little edge of your seat. We'll
Yeah. Usually not by your choice.
say. Yeah.
Of course, it would have been much easier to land in Apia,
Yeah.
but this was the American territory, the U.S. territory, which we acquired in 1900, and Apia was British.
Mm.
So, and they were actually trying to block us from doing these routes.
So if when he first started noticing the leak, he would have been way too heavy to be able to land.
Way too heavy.
So
He took off with 2,300 gallons.
there's really no way he could have landed before when he did.
And it was a team effort. It was probably the engineer who noticed the leak.
Yeah.
That engineer model went up until, man, pretty late. I mean, 747s have an engineer, I believe, but
I don't know.
into the 80s, maybe?
Engineer and assistant engineer, two of them.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So when you fly, do you still have to take oil samples occasionally? Do civilian
Oh,
pilots
heck
do
no.
that?
That
No?
is not a part of, no.
That's some maintenance people do that?
I mean, beforehand, you check like your dipstick and make sure
Right.
you have oil, but you're not like actively sampling.
No.
Huh, that must just be a military thing.
You've flown on commercial aircraft where they're dumping fuel, haven't you? Hasn't everybody had that experience?
I have.
One time, I think, yeah.
I have not.
I have
Oh,
not.
I have. Ended up in Wake Island.
Oh,
Goodness.
Because there's a statement that this tragedy was responsible for prohibiting the dumping of fuel on all U.S. passenger aircraft. However,
What?
maybe it wasn't a U.S. aircraft. So they said Ed Music, age 44, faithful practitioner of the calculated risk that contributed once more to aviation progress, even by his death.
And there's just hardly anything out here.
Yeah, this is
Starting to see some rocks, probably.
Rock.
or rack.
Oh, it's got a couple peaks.
Peak.
No? All right.
we could fire up the intercom and see if Bobby sees anything.
I thought this was an 8-hour dive.
Yeah.
Didn't pack enough sandwiches.
I'm kind of hungry down here.
Can you
Very
like
cold.
drop a jacket off the side?
He's warming himself by the incandescent bulbs.
It's funny, there's actually, this is barely related, but there's a tool that's used in some ocean science when we have a cable in the water, usually for a very different purpose. We'll have a quasi-dumb instrument at the bottom, especially on just a straight wire, it's nothing but steel. And at some point in time, you need what's at the end of that cable to do something. And so what they do is they have a weight that fastens around the wire at the vessel, and you release that weight, and it's called a messenger. And it goes all the way down the cable, and it hits a receiving lever on this dumb object and causes it to do whatever you need it to do, to close a valve, to seal a container, to drop something on the bottom, etc. And they're done. You don't see a lot of messengers used anymore.
Yeah.
There are things we use now called acoustic releases.
Yeah.
So we can have something on the end of a wire,
And then here's
lower
that
it down to
signal.
the bottom, and then we make a sound from a device on the vessel, and that causes it to open. And I've worked on some acoustic releases where we've left them on the bottom, I think for a year,
Yeah.
maybe 2. And then we come back later and release a mooring, and it comes up to the surface just by that working.
I think Rennie was talking about being able to send acoustic signals to activate sonar
Yeah.
yesterday.
Summer, what did you...
Is this a...
Just kidding.
I changed the screen by accident.
It was on PC
I don't have
3
that option.
or 2. It was on PC 2.
She only has 8 options.
Sorry, what was the question? Got distracted.
Oh no, I was just Ed was talking about acoustic signals and acoustic releases, and I was talking about how you'd mentioned yesterday that the acoustic signal could be used to activate.
Those
Yeah.
acoustic releases, when they test them on deck, that is not the most pleasant of sounds.
It's very loud.
Hurts Bobby's ears.
Yeah.
He's underwater.
But it's usually a pattern of, it's like, you know, a
Yeah.
little, sounds like a little cell phone ring or something, but you don't, because you don't want that to be accidentally tripped by anything. So it has to receive a certain pattern, a unique pattern that it shouldn't hear under any other circumstances.
You usually dial that in as a code on the transceiver box.
Right.
Not again.
Yeah. So the question about the lower right-hand corner of the quad view and why it's always the same. We actually don't make that image here. That's done over at URI, University of Rhode Island. And the reason why it appears to be kind of static is that's a very large map, and we are moving very, very small distances right now. So we're only traveling about 1 knot as we move back and forth this 2 square mile search area. So you
that
won't
map could be 300 or 400 miles wide,
yeah.
maybe more.
So it's not going to appear that we're moving very much, if at all.
And our track, since we've been here for a while, probably is just staying static.
So if you're an educator, just like our viewer from Argentina, I strongly encourage you to check out Education tab right at the top of nautiluslive.org and actually go down and check out some of our free resources. Create yourself a personal login for free, and then go in and explore all we have to offer with those free instructional resources. If you have questions or want to connect with us more or interact with us, definitely please, we encourage you to email education@oat.org. We'd love to be able to interact with you more and your students, answer the questions they have, and help inspire them to hopefully sit in the same seats we are one day. Maybe even join Bobby on ship.
Yeah.
Question has come in about how many places we've marked, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peyton, but we're at 56?
56,
56.
correct. Yeah, and all of those are going to go through post-processing. We're going to look at the side scan sonar once it's stitched together and sort of reevaluate which points we're going to investigate.
Have we marked any targets this watch?
Negative.
No?
We've been stingy with the marking.
Yes. Well, you're finally tuned into your rock sensor.
I think so.
Now that Cooper is sleeping, you can focus. This is a very uneventful section of the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Until the airplane.
Yeah. Until right now.
It'll come.
Now.
It'll show up when it's ready.
It's just a little shy.
That's been by itself for 81 years. That's not used to hanging out with others. Continue sending in those questions. We'd be happy to continue to answer them and share what we have. And it's about 3:30 here p.m. American Samoa time in the afternoon. Hope you're enjoying your day wherever you are as you continue to explore with us.
So, Ronnie, I'm going to ask you a series of crazy questions.
Okay.
Did I hear that the side scan has 2 speed operating modes?
2 speed?
Yeah, like it works at like 3 knots and 8 knots or something like that?
Dan was talking about a different, an AUV actually that had that.
Okay. So this side scan is really made for like 2-knot operations?
I'm not too sure on the optimal speed for this unit.
Okay. What happens if you go faster than that?
You would just have
Everything gets stretched out more.
Yeah.
Well, you might not see everything.
Okay.
Because we're
Right.
going slow, we're hitting something multiple times.
Yeah.
So it's appearing longer than it is. If you're going too fast for the ping rate, you might ping, and you'd entirely miss something.
Right.
Oh, that makes sense.
And we're not in any
But-
actual weather state here. These are just the local conditions, right? Don't you think so?
Yeah, it seems pretty
Yeah.
calm.
Benign.
Yeah.
So there's no chance of firing up Thor and knocking this thing out.
That would be the tension on the cable with
Oh.
Argus at depth would probably be,
Trying to get
Not
Thor to
something
go
we wanna
3.5 knots would be a bit of a challenge too.
yeah. And then also your capability of
Avoiding
terrain avoidance.
Yeah.
I think Dan's exploring the manual.
Huh?
So for those of you that are following along with us, the time is 3:33 American Samoa time in the afternoon, and we are continuing to tow Argus behind us, which is something that is a bit different than probably what you're used to seeing with our ROV dives. And the reason why we're doing that is because we are side scan sonar mapping the search area. It's about 2 square miles. We're going to actually be expanding that after we finish this next
Have we seen
transect.
shapes like that before on starboard?
It's far enough out that we would have gotten a good image of it
On the other
way.
line?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's right at the ratty edge.
And we
Right.
definitely have seen shapes like that, just
Okay,
kind of ghosting over on the side.
Yeah.
Getting ghosted by rocks.
That's right.
I think that'd be
This is
disappointing
like
if you're a geologist.
Looking at clouds and describing what you see, except everything you see is a plane.
Yeah. A part of a plane.
Yeah.
Question about the cable that just came in. Marine life doesn't really need to worry about our cable. It's not particularly large, and I'm sure they can easily avoid it as it trails behind us through the water. Can't really see a way that they could, unless they wrap themselves around it, but
No.
I don't think that's something that's going to happen.
It's just
Yeah.
maybe 1 in a million chance. I mean, the ocean is vast. If something just goes in and bonks it, that would be the end of it. Oh,
Probably